How's it going, everybody? In today's episode, we are diving into the uranium industry, and it is perfect time to do so. These last actually couple of days, we had some interesting macro news come out of Japan, which sent uranium equities up to the tune around 15 to 20%. Now, the commodity didn't move much itself, but I'm no expert myself. So today we are bringing back Amir Adnani, the CEO of Uranium Energy Corp, to give us some insights as to what he's seen unfold in this industry. Before we get into that, can you first give us some insight into your business background in both the uranium industry as well as the gold industry?
Thanks for having me on. I'm an entrepreneur and have been involved in the two yellow metals for the last almost 20 years. Yellow metals being uranium and gold. Of course, I'm fascinated and believe in the foundational value that both of these commodities offer. Gold being the ultimate currency, the only real currency that can never be fudged. And finally, uranium, which is truly an energy commodity. In these two arenas, I've built a company called Uranium Energy Corp that I'm the CEO of. And that company today is the largest diversified North American focused uranium company. And in the gold sector, I've built a company called Gold Mining Inc., where I'm the chairman of that company. And that's listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange and New York. And what has got my attention in the last 3 to 4 years is the royalty sector. I think it's a very intelligent way of creating shareholder value. And so I've built two royalty companies that I'm the largest shareholder and chairman of, and Uranium Royalty Corp, and a founding director of Gold Royalty Corp. So very much interested in development, acquisition, financing of mineral properties involving gold and uranium, have built businesses in these areas. But my main focus as CEO, the only company that I'm the CEO of and have been for the last 18 years, is Uranium Energy Corp, and truly building that to become a category leader when it comes to North American and especially US focused uranium mining.
Cool. Now, the last time we talked, we discussed how uranium can be in the early stages of a new possible bull trend. Now, when it comes to identifying a new trend, I like to pay attention to three things. Those three things are social inputs, economic inputs, and political inputs. So I want to hand you the floor to discuss, what should investors and speculators be made aware of in the uranium industry when it comes to the social inputs, the economic inputs, and potentially any political inputs taking place too as well right now.
Uranium is the fuel for nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is a solution to climate change. In addition to that, there are three key mega trends of electrification and decarbonization, which are driving the need for nuclear power, along with energy transition. Finally, on top of that, we have the issue around energy security as a result of what Russia has done with their invasion of Ukraine and the ongoing war and the weaponization of their energy resources, trying to hold countries hostage to their energy resources, especially hydrocarbons. These are the issues of our times, and these are going to be the issues that are going to be with us for a long time. We are going to see greater number of electric vehicles hitting the road. That is a bona fide trend. That will require more and more electricity. What does nuclear power do? Provide baseload around the clock electricity. We need to decarbonize. What does nuclear power provide? It's emission-free electricity. And so why is it that nuclear power is receiving a central role in every climate scientist, every environmentalist, every politician, every policymaker, every company's plan for the future moving forward in terms of an energy mix? Because it's emission-free and because it does one thing renewables don't do. Renewables work a third of the time, 25% of the time. That's their capacity factor. Nuclear energy has a 95% plus capacity factor. That's what baseload means. So as a result, I think you check all the boxes. Finally, who wants to be a hostage to Russia's oil and gas? This should be the least desirable thing for any individual or country. Russia is holding Germany hostage, Western Europe hostage, by leveraging its energy resources, its oil and gas. And we should not be held hostage to Russia's uranium and nuclear fuel. Unfortunately, that is the problem today. The United States is not mining any uranium, and the largest single supplier of nuclear fuel and uranium to the United States are the countries of Russia, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan. Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, last time I checked, are much closer to Russia, both geographically and in terms of political alliances and influence. So ultimately, I think if you want to be in charge of your own energy destiny, you want to have energy security, if you want to have energy independence, you want to have those attributes so that you can support the objectives we talked about. You need to have nuclear power on your own soil, and you need to have uranium supply chains for the fuel that you control. And that's the opportunity that I see both in uranium in North America. And that's the social, political, and economic realities that I see as well that's unfolding in front of us right now.
We also discussed how sentiment was quite bearish around this commodity. However, it seems like that is starting to shift at a rapid rate where people are becoming more open to this idea. Have you seen any polls or any other data that supports that?
I would start with the fact that this year we've seen public opinion polls in support of nuclear energy at an all-time high, especially amongst democratic people that recognize themselves as a Democrat. Historically, there's been stronger support amongst the Republicans for nuclear energy, but there's now all-time high public opinion polls in support of nuclear power. That is driving the support we're seeing in Washington for nuclear energy on a bipartisan basis. It's quite historic. The Democratic Party's platform for the first time included support for nuclear energy. The infrastructure, the Inflation Reduction Bill and the infrastructure bill had significant support in it in terms of credits and dollars being geared towards nuclear power plants and the creation of a strategic uranium reserve for the federal government. And so I think this is beyond rhetoric. This is not a case where you and I are here projecting that there might be a trend. We've already arrived at the station. The train is leaving the station. And that train has on it bipartisan support, all-time high public opinion poll, supporting nuclear energy for the first time in a long time, because to your point, this was a hated sector for over a decade since the nuclear accident at Fukushima in Japan. And so coming out of that nuclear winter and turning the corner in a major way, both in terms of policy support, not just in the United States, but in the European Union, where nuclear power is now included in the European taxonomy, and seeing this incredible growth that's taking place in China. They've committed to build 150 nuclear reactors over the next 15 years, overtaking the US to become the largest source of nuclear power generation. These are incredibly positive trends. And coming back to what happened in 2011 in Japan, the accident at Fukushima, Japan for the last 11 years stayed very low-key when it came to nuclear power, was on the fence about how fast they would restart reactors. And in the last 48 hours, the news that has moved uranium stocks and equities up as much as 20% in one day is Japan's news that there is just a stunning policy shift they've announced where they're moving back to nuclear energy, not only to restart their existing reactors that have been offline, but to build even a new generation of nuclear reactors. And so that policy change as well, I think, signals where public sentiment is and where policy is going. And I really think Japan was the last missing piece of a puzzle that now looks like a picture that, to me, is the picture of a perfect bull market emerging.
How dire would you say that the U.S. production of uranium right now is?
This is the most important issue in America that no one's talking about. This should be everyone's single biggest concern, because 1 in every 5 homes in America is powered by nuclear energy. That means 1 in every 5 homes in America requires uranium. But there is no uranium mining in the US. This largest supplier, as I mentioned, is Russia and the countries of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. That should be a concern. Because if Russia wants to do retaliatory sanctions, if we have a disagreement with them, and God knows, we have lots of disagreements with them right now, like their illegal invasion of Ukraine, that this is an issue that we can't ignore, that there is incredible dependence on foreign uranium, unlike any other commodity. And we have gone as far as banning Russian oil and gas banning all sorts of things coming out of Russia, but we haven't put a ban yet on uranium. And that just sends a mixed message, and it doesn't make any sense. Luckily, there is a bill in the U.S. Senate. There's a bill also in the U.S. House that has bipartisan support that's proposing to ban Russian uranium imports, but that hasn't advanced yet. I hope it does. And I think conversations like this can really help raise awareness about this vulnerability that one in every 5 home in America has. And it's a vulnerability and dependence on Russia that should be absolutely eliminated, in my opinion.
Just the other day, I checked the price of Uranium Energy Corp in the markets and see if, are we up on the year, are we down on the year? And when I checked the other day, it was up around 20% year to date. But this is in the midst of a global meltdown taking place in equities across the globe. Has there anything in 2022 taught you about the importance of owning both gold and uranium in this current state?
Yeah, I mean, I love uranium for the sense that in a year where everything is going down and there's talk of a recession, are we in a recession? Are we going into a recession? Uranium is recession proof. Uranium is used by nuclear power plants that are going to keep generating electricity, whether we have a recession or not. And so that defensive position that it has, that decoupling attribute that it has, the fact that whether we end up in a recession doesn't diminish or change demand for uranium is such a solid value proposition during a difficult year in the equity market. So to your point, you see that in the share price, where the share price is up in a year where everything is down. And second, turning the attention to gold. I mean, ultimately, I don't think we have seen what the gold price will do and should do in this inflationary environment just yet. And the reason for that, obviously, is that during this period where the Fed, for now, is engaging in the rate hikes, that is clearly keeping the US dollar and the US dollar index stronger. But that cannot be a sustainable trend. It absolutely cannot be. Otherwise, the whole world economy will collapse due to all the US denominated debt that's out there in emerging markets. Once this phase of rate hikes comes to an end, which is a question of just the when, not an if, that's when we're going to see the rally in the gold price. And do I sleep comfortably at night knowing that my gold exposure is my ultimate inflation hedge? Absolutely. Am I happy with the gold price of $1,750 given the environment that we're in? Absolutely not. In fact, I think even as of right now, the gold price should be significantly higher than at least $2,500 an ounce. It's not there, but I think when it plays catch up, hopefully it'll make up for some of the frustration that I faced with gold here this last year.
I can understand that. So I want to hop more into Uranium Energy Corp and kind of how it fits into this. So we discussed with ESG compliance, many countries are turning to nuclear energy. Uranium Energy Corp has done something unprecedented. So it's followed the footsteps of those that say, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. So is it true that Uranium Energy Corp actually owns the physical supply of uranium? And is there another way for the average person to own uranium, or is it pretty much just shareholders of the company who have that access?
I think it's difficult to own physical uranium simply because just knowing the process to open the accounts that you need in order to hold physical uranium, it's not as simple as just opening up a bank account to own or hold physical gold, or to go to a coin shop and buy gold coins. So it is a bit more complicated, but some hedge funds, for example, have figured it out, and there are hedge funds that own physical uranium. So it's not impossible. Having said that, about a year ago, when the uranium prices were below $30 per pound, they're currently at $48 per pound. But when they were below $30 per pound, we took a view as a company that the price was simply too low. It was below the global industry average cost of mining, and that it made sense for us not only to acquire projects for uranium, which we've been the most active company in the whole sector in terms of acquisitions and M&A, including our acquisition of Uranium One from the Russian government last year. But we stepped into the market and we bought physical uranium below $30 per pound, and we even contracted for physical uranium deliveries to take place over time, giving us a low-cost base of physical inventory that was ready to go. It didn't come with operating costs or technical risk or political risk because we purchased them on U.S. soil. So it's what we call our U.S. warehouse physical uranium program. It's the largest of its kind. It includes up to 5 million pounds of physical uranium that we've either purchased or have contracted to receive over time. All of our future deliveries out as late as 2025 come in at today all-in cost of $38 per pound. That's still $10 below what the prevailing market is at $48. So we have an implied gain in that physical portfolio. We can sell at today's prices and realize gain. And that's something that I think you gotta, when you look at our company, really our thesis has been all about as much exposure as possible to higher uranium prices. That prevailing uranium prices are simply too low to incentivize new mine development. That supply of uranium annually at 130 million pounds is not enough to meet 200 million pounds of annual demand. And the only way for that gap to correct itself is with further production increases, and that will happen with higher uranium prices. And I think those higher uranium prices are $70 to $100 a pound uranium in the coming years, and much higher than that beyond those years, simply because uranium mining, just like mining copper and gold and silver, is becoming more and more expensive in today's inflationary environment, in today's labor market, where it's difficult to hire people to work at coffee shops and airports, yet alone mines at remote locations. It's going to take a higher uranium price to incentivize the development of the next generation of uranium mines that are going to fill the gap that we have today, that structural deficit between supply and demand.
So it sounds like you're in the driver's seat here. If uranium prices keep going to the upside, you're in the driver's seat to maximize that potential. I have a question. I heard something to do with hedging. So it seemed, can you kind of walk us through what that means? I heard you talking about it recently that you're not hedging, but there's other companies that might be hedging or something like that.
You heard about that. Yeah, it's a favorite topic of mine. I think with hedging, you leave so much upside on the table. Some of the companies in previous bull market cycles where uranium prices went from $20 a pound to $140 per pound were hedged at $40 or $50 and left almost $100 a pound on the table. When you're making millions of pounds of sales annually, leaving even $5 on the table in terms of upside, in my mind, is inexcusable, yet alone $100 a pound. And so when I look at this issue, I think that there's some old school thinking and there's some old school strategies in the uranium market that predates the current environment. It goes back to the days where uranium companies in North America were owned by governments, and government-owned entities have a different mindset. They don't take any risk to the upside or to the downside. They're just there to do a job. And that mindset of contracting is what you get if you're got governments running the uranium mining industry. We're an entrepreneurial company. I founded this business. I've been building this business brick by brick, figuratively speaking, to get to where we are. And we didn't do this over 18 years so that we can cap our upside when we're about to see the biggest bull market of our lifetime in uranium. And I have not seen the environment this positive for nuclear energy and uranium today than any time in the last almost 20 years that I've been in the business. And so I think hedging is an attribute that might provide very safe and well-documented returns. But I think if you're looking for maximum upside and leverage, and 100% unhedged strategy is the way to go. And my company, Uranium Energy Corp, we're a 100% unhedged company. We don't operate with the government mindset of signing contracts and fixing in the price. And I think as an investor, you need to understand what hedging and unhedged, what the difference is and what it means in terms of return. And maybe someone is happy with knowing you have fixed returns in a company's portfolio. That's fine. But it's just really understanding what different strategies are, what they mean, and what kind of outcome they're trying to express.
And with that said, there are some heavy hitter shareholders of your company, Hall of Fame Wall Street names that own nearly around 45% of the shares. Who are some of the company's well-known firms? If you can't answer that.
BlackRock, Vanguard, Fidelity, Sprott. These are just some of the names, the uranium ETFs, individual uranium investors, management team, including myself. I'm a top 5 largest shareholder of the company. So management has skin in the game along with the shareholders of the company. We're not hired guns. We're people that formed this company and have been here since the beginning and have been committed to it. When this was an out of favor sector, when it was contrarian to buy uranium assets, we were buying uranium assets. Last year, we were not afraid to step up and do a deal with the Russian government. This was before their invasion of Ukraine. We acquired Uranium One, a company that had assembled under Russian ownership the largest uranium assets on U.S. soil. We stepped up and repatriated those assets. Just last week, we announced the closing of another acquisition in Canada's Athabasca Basin, a company called UEX that we acquired there, giving us a pipeline of some of the highest grade uranium deposits in the world that is contained in that portfolio. And so we have a management team and an execution of a strategy that our institutional shareholders that you touched on and that I highlighted, I think validate. I think the ownership interest in the company by the BlackRocks of the world validates the fact that we've built a strategy and a platform here that really is the go-to name for North American exposure to uranium projects that are permitted and production ready in the US, with very high grade, highest grade uranium projects in the world in Canada as part of our development pipeline, all unhedged and all in politically stable Western jurisdictions that are going to have the highest standards of ESG and social responsibility.
It's awesome. We got some really good insight in today's interview. I have just a few more questions. These are coming from the outside part of my Patreon group. So we don't take too much of your time. But one of the questions here was, how do you see the current Fed rate hike cycle impacting both uranium commodities and/or uranium equities? Should we be worried about that, or is it just noise within the signals that are taking place?
No, it's more than noise. It's already playing out. The US dollar index is very strong, and that's suppressed commodity prices. That's a very expected relationship between commodity prices and the US dollar.
In terms of employment in the uranium space, are companies having issues obtaining any new workers?
It is challenging. It's a sector that was not adding to its human capital base for the last decade. Prior to that, it didn't experience sustained enough periods of growth to replenish the human resource space. And so the sector does need to pay, in my opinion, careful attention and invest in human resources, attract new people, and expand the workforce. That's only going to happen with high sustained uranium prices. And that, I think, underscores why we have, again, it's another variable in the bull case for uranium.
Is Uranium Energy Corp working with modular reactor startups, or are they mainly focused on their mining efforts in the U.S. and Paraguay? Do they have any information on how the U.S. government plans on subsidizing nuclear plants instead of Biden just saying that they will?
Bill Gates' TerraPower has announced the construction of a SMR, small modular reactor, in the state of Wyoming. We've had numerous discussions with their management team. We'd love to be able to provide them the uranium for that small modular reactor from a mine in Wyoming. We're the largest company in the United States and in the state of Wyoming for having fully permitted projects for production. And I believe that the area of growth in the nuclear energy sector with small modular reactors is such an exciting area. There's going to be hundreds of smaller modular reactors built in remote parts of the world. And not to mention small modular reactors and microreactors are what are powering space travel. It's what's powering the nuclear navy, aircraft carriers, submarines, are all utilizing smaller microreactors.
Cool. And then one last final one. There were so many questions that came in. Given the current state of the geopolitics, how do you see the long-term outlook for the uranium export from Kazakhstan? And do you see a role, and this is part two kind of, and do you see a role in Canadian uranium in Athabasca?
Absolutely. I think any Western utility company that has a sustainability plan and a sustainability report and prides itself in how they procure uranium, which is part of a sustainability strategy, should be mindful about bringing uranium in from jurisdictions that respect basic human rights. Earlier this year, the president of Kazakhstan openly declared that its security forces can fire on peaceful protesters that were protesting in that country. And it took Russian forces to come in to stabilize protests in that country. If you're a Western utility and you're still buying uranium from countries that are so hostile towards democratic values, then to me, you can't go out and on the other end talk about how you have a sustainable practice. And when you look at projects in Canada and North America, these are being developed with the highest standards and priority given to local communities, social impact, measuring greenhouse gases. My company has been focused on this area to make sure that future uranium mining can be done with less and less greenhouse gas emissions. And in fact, looking at viability of net zero uranium mining. The Kazakhs are not doing that. The Russians are not doing that. And on top of that, they're committing atrocities by killing people. You look at what's going on in Ukraine, peace and the amount of civilian deaths that are taking place in that country because of Russian hostility. Does it make sense for a Western utility to keep buying uranium from Russia in light of what it has shown to be its agenda? And so I think moving forward, there has to be a bifurcated market, and there is going to be a growing trend where Western utilities will look to buy uranium from jurisdictions where the responsibility around a sustainable way of mining uranium is prioritized. And I think that puts the spotlight bright and center on Canada and the United States. On top of that, again, as I mentioned, there are proposed bills in the US Senate and the House that are looking to ban Russian uranium imports for the exact reasons that I just outlined right now. So what I'm talking about is not just something that only I've thought of. This is something that is being reviewed and discussed and thought of in both U.S. chambers, and it's an interesting area to pay attention to because, again, it will further place a premium, I think, on Western sources of uranium coming from U.S. and Canada.
Amir, I tried to do as best as I could to just extract as much as information as possible in the shortest amount of time. Where can people go to learn more about Uranium Energy Corp and also follow you if you are on any social platforms?
I encourage you to take a look at our corporate website, which is www.uraniumenergy.com. And both the company and myself are also on Twitter. You can follow me. My handle there is @Amir Adnani, where you'll hear me and I can, for what it's worth, hear me tweet about gold and uranium, entrepreneurship, and the areas that is dear and near to my heart and that we've talked about in this interview.
Thank you once again, Amir, for coming out. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.